Hi, I'm Francesco Gennari, and today I'll perform Studio No.3, a piece that explores polyrhythmic patterns and polymetric phrasing. After the performance, I rebuild the patch from scratch and walk you through the techniques, creative choices and structural decisions behind it. This track is built around 4 voices. The yellow oscillator of Brenso plus Doepfer low-pass gate as the main one, the green oscillator of Brenso plus SEM filter as the bass, and 2 voices made with the 2 oscillator of the Piston onda plus Optomix. All of them go through an effects section made with the Disting EX and the Empress Zoia. Let's start with the modular completely unpatched so we can go through each connection in detail. For this track, Usta has been extremely useful, especially because changing patterns is quick and very performance-friendly. For example, track number 1 is initially set up to play patterns from 1 to 6. In the central section of the piece, I changed the end pattern value to 11. To set the ending pattern, you need to enter performance mode and then hold Shift while turning the encoder. At this point, I also changed the starting pattern so that it loops only on pattern 11. To do this, hold down the Set button and turn the encoder. Let's move on the first voice, where I'm using only one oscillator of the Brenso, the yellow one. That's because I want to use the waveform modulation section to create a timbral evolution through the track. I don't need FM or AM here, and I can use the other oscillator elsewhere. This voice is controlled by track number 1 of Usta. CVA goes into the volt per octave of the yellow oscillator. Gate A goes into the CV1 of the Doepfer low-pass gate, and Gate B is the clock source for a part of Bagai. Usually in my system I use the Sapel, but in this case I didn't need so many different modulations. I choose Bagai because its sample and hold outputs are bipolar, which is really useful, for example, to modulate the pan of one of the QSC mixer channels. It's also possible to have independent clocks for different sections. The sample and hold section receives the clock from gate B of Usta's track 2. The fluctuating random voltages section has its own independent clock, set by this knob, which allows more unpredictable results. I use the sample and hold output to modulate both the triangle shaper of the Brenso and the CV2 of the low-pass gate. So the low-pass gate doesn't open only when triggered by the gate from Usta. Meanwhile, the fluctuated random voltage modulates the wave shaper source, letting me blend the triangle shaper signal with the pulse shaper signal before it goes into the wave folder. I manually change the position of the wave folder using the knob during the performance. Finally, I connect the final out to the input of the low-pass gate and its output to channel number 2 of QSC. For the bass, I use the green oscillator of Brenso, which is controlled by Usta's track number 2. CVA goes into the volt per octave. I use the saw out, which goes into the SEM VCF. The filter output goes directly into channel number 1 of the QSC. Gate A sends clock to the Zoia. I'll get into that later in the video. And gate B goes into the sample and hold clock input of Bagai. This is a static bassline, changing pitch every 12 steps of voice 1. Next, we move on to the voice 3 and 4. The sound chain for both voices is very similar. Both oscillators of the Piston are set to saw waves. Track 3 of Usta controls voice 3 and track 4 controls the last voice. CVA from track 3 goes through the slew limiter of Falistri before reaching the volt per octave of the oscillator A. I use it to add glide during the performance, while CVA from track 4 goes directly into the oscillator B. Gate A from both tracks goes into the 2-channel of Falistri, generating the envelope that opens the 2-channel of Optomix. The oscillator's output are patched into the input of the Optomix. In channel 1, I add a percussive element by patching the minus random clock out of Bagai into the strike input. Then I connect output 1 into the channel number 3 of the QSC. In voice number 4, I use the quantized sample and hold output of Bagai to modulate the pan of QSC channel 4, making the voice move across the stereo field through the track. And of course, I connect output 2 to channel number 4 of the QSC. Especially in the first section of the track, there is polyrhythmic interaction between the voices. Voice 1 plays continuous 8-note triplets. Voice 2, the bass, plays long 4/4 notes. Voice 3 alternates straight 8-note duplets with quarter-note triplets, and voice 4 plays quarter-note duplets. The result sounds like this. To add more non-programmed, let's say random variations, I used Usta's gate layers to change the number of repetitions of certain gates. Pressing the gate button, you can enter the different gate layers. And pressing the encoder, you can select the ratcheting mode for the gate output. By turning the encoder, you can select how many repetitions per stage you want. When the LED is green, you can see the probability variation, and when the LED is blue, you can see the range of the variation. I use this technique on track 3 and 4. There is also a polymetric element in the final part of the track. The phrasing of voice number 1 changes Pattern 11 is now a 15-note sequence, while the other 3 voices maintain their previous structure. This creates a layered, non-aligned phrasing, almost a phase-shifting effect. Another thing I do in the final section is isolating voices 3 and 4 by using only the oscillators. I take the mix output of Piston Onda and patch it into the ST mix. I used 2 effects on this track, the Disting EX and the Empress Zoia. The Disting EX is set in dual mode, with both parts acting as a ping-pong delays. I wanted 2 delays with different clocks. The left section is clocked by Bagai, divided by 4 via the flip-flop of Flistri. The right section is clocked by the plus random clock from Bagai. Both effects receive signal from the mixer's yellow aux send. The 2 stereo outputs of the Disting go to the Befaco ST mix. The Zoia is clocked via Usta. To do this, I patched the gate A from track number 2 into the control port of the pedal. I made a patch with 2 separate paths that I can activate independently. Both are fed from the green aux of the QSC. The first one is a ghost reverb into a vibrato into a distortion, activated with the right foot switch. The second one is the same ghost reverb into a ping-pong delay, clocked by Usta, then into a more aggressive distortion, ending in a VCA. So I could patch this button and trigger the effects by pressing it. Thanks for watching. If you are curious about any part of the patch or want to go deeper into the process, feel free to leave a comment or join the conversation on the Frap Tool Discord. See you in the next one!